The fork froze halfway to my mouth when Mom's voice cut through the Sunday dinner conversation like ice. So, Elaine, when were you planning to tell us you're about to lose your job? Her eyes bore into me with a coldness I had never seen before, and my stomach dropped. Dad set down his glass with deliberate force, the sound echoing through the dining room. My brother Mark sat across from me, his expression carefully neutral, but I caught the tiniest flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. What are you talking about? I managed to whisper, my throat suddenly tight. Mark leaned forward, his voice dripping with false concern. Elaine, there's no point hiding it anymore. Your company contacted us. They're investigating you for misconduct. Something about financial irregularities and unprofessional conduct. The room spun. Financial irregularities? Unprofessional conduct? None of this made any sense. I worked in marketing at Peterson Digital Solutions. I had never touched company finances beyond my own expense reports. That's not. I started, but Dad cut me off. Don't lie to us, Elaine. We raised you better than this. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her napkin, tears already forming in her eyes. How could you bring such disgrace to this family? My name is Elaine Martinez. I'm 29 years old, from Austin, Texas, and what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. If you want to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe to my channel. Trust me, you won't believe where this goes. I drove home in a fog, my hands shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. The humiliation of that dinner table scene played on repeat in my mind. Mom's tears. Dad's disappointment. Mark's carefully crafted concern that barely masked his smugness. None of it made sense. I had poured my heart into my job at Peterson Digital for the past 5 years, climbing from junior marketing associate to senior campaign manager. My performance reviews were stellar. My team respected me. My boss, Vincent Krause, had just last week hinted at a major promotion coming my way. Financial irregularities. The accusation was absurd. I had never even seen the company's internal financial systems beyond basic expense tracking. When I finally made it home to my small apartment, I collapsed onto my couch and let the tears come. My phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table. 3 missed calls from Vincent. 4 from my direct supervisor, Patricia. My heart hammered in my chest. This couldn't be happening. Not 3 days before the biggest promotion meeting of my career. Not when I was finally about to prove that all those years of 80-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends had been worth it. What if Mark was telling the truth? What if somehow, impossibly, I was under investigation? Monday morning arrived too quickly. I dressed in my most professional suit, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. My reflection in the mirror looked pale and exhausted, dark circles shadowing my eyes despite the makeup I'd carefully applied. Vincent's assistant met me at the elevator with an urgent expression. He's waiting for you in his office. Conference rooms booked. My legs felt like lead as I walked down the familiar hallway. This was it. The end of everything I'd worked for. Vincent looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. Elaine, sit down. We need to talk. I sank into the chair across from his desk, preparing for the worst. He leaned back, studying me carefully. Your performance review is excellent as always. The promotion committee is very impressed. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? You're not under investigation, Elaine. Your record here is spotless. Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt dizzy. But I thought. Vincent's expression hardened. However, we did have an unusual situation last week. Someone called the main office line claiming to be a family member, asking if you were being disciplined or investigated. They implied you'd been involved in some kind of misconduct. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes after that meeting, staring at nothing. Someone had called my workplace. Someone had tried to sabotage my career by planting seeds of doubt about my integrity. And there was only one person who would dare do something like that. Mark. My older brother by 4 years. The golden child, who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. The one who had sailed through life on charm and manipulation, while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. But why? What could he possibly gain from destroying my reputation? Then Mom's words from dinner came rushing back. You're not fit to handle property.
property?
My parents owned 3 rental properties in Austin, modest investments they'd built up over 30 years of careful saving. They'd always said the properties would be split equally between Mark and me when the time came. But what if Mark wanted them all to himself? My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Your mother, and I need to talk to you. Come by the house tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening. When I'd be exhausted from a full day of work and vulnerable from the emotional roller coaster of the past 2 days. Perfect timing for whatever Mark had planned next. I arrived at my parents' house Tuesday evening with my stomach in knots. Mom answered the door, her expression tight and uncomfortable. Dad sat in his usual armchair, looking older than I remembered. Mark wasn't there, but his presence hung over the room like a storm cloud. Elaine, Dad started, his voice formal in a way that made my chest ache. We've been talking with your brother about the family properties. Here it was. The real reason behind Mark's lies. He's explained to us that you're under a lot of pressure at work. Mental strain. He's worried about you. Mom nodded, wringing her hands. Mark thinks it would be too much for you to help manage the rental properties. He suggested we should simplify things, make him the primary trustee. My voice came out steadier than I felt. And you believe him? He's shown us evidence, sweetheart, Mom said softly. Documentation about workplace issues. He's just looking out for you. What documentation? I demanded. Can I see it? Dad shifted uncomfortably. He said you'd react defensively. That's part of the problem, apparently. They plan to revise their will. Put Mark in charge of everything. Cut me out based on nothing but his lies. I see, I said quietly. When are you planning to make these changes? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold while I thought. Rage would get me nowhere. Confronting Mark directly would only make me look unstable, exactly as he'd framed me. He'd won this round through careful manipulation and strategic lies. But I wasn't going to lose the war. Wednesday morning, I arrived at work early and requested a meeting with Human Resources. I need copies of my performance reviews for the past 5 years, I told the HR director, a sharp-eyed woman named Beatrice. Also documentation of any commendations, awards, or recognition I've received. Beatrice studied me carefully. May I ask why? Someone's spreading false information about my job performance. I need to protect myself. She nodded slowly. I'll have everything ready by end of day. And Elaine? Whatever's happening, you have our support. Your record here speaks for itself. I spent my lunch break calling the 3 property management companies my parents used for their rentals. I introduced myself as their daughter and asked to be added as an emergency contact for all 3 properties. Not to take control, just to stay informed. If Mark was planning something with those properties, I wanted to know about it. Thursday brought an unexpected lead. I was checking my mail when my neighbor Mrs. Williams, my neighbor Mrs. Williams stopped me on the stairs. Elaine, dear, how's your brother doing? He seemed so stressed last time I saw him. I paused, turning back. Stressed? Oh yes, a few weeks ago. He was here visiting you, I think. He was on his phone in the parking lot, very agitated. Something about a loan being denied. My mind raced. Mark had never visited me at my apartment. Did you hear anything else? Mrs. Williams looked uncomfortable. I don't like to gossip, but he mentioned needing collateral for a business venture. He seemed quite desperate. A business venture. That explained everything. Mark needed money, and he was trying to use our parents' properties as collateral. That's why he needed me out of the picture. That's why he'd fabricated an entire narrative about my supposed career collapse. I thanked Mrs. Williams and went inside, my thoughts spinning. If Mark was being denied loans, that meant his financial situation was worse than anyone knew. And desperate people did desperate things.
My phone rang.
Dad. Your brother mentioned something troubling, he said without preamble. Have you ever been sued, Elaine? Sued. I repeated, genuinely confused.
No, Dad.
Never. Why would you ask that? Mark said there might be legal issues from your job situation. Something about a potential lawsuit against the company that could involve you. Another lie, more elaborate than the last. Mark was building a complete fictional narrative, layer by layer, painting me as unstable, professionally compromised, and legally vulnerable. Dad, none of that is true. I can prove it. That's what Mark said you'd say, Dad replied, his voice tired. He warned us you might deny everything. It was brilliant, really. By predicting my denials, Mark made himself look credible and me look defensive. Every truth I spoke would sound like exactly what a guilty person would say. When did Mark start telling you all this? I asked carefully. About 3 weeks ago. He's been very concerned about you. 3 weeks. Right around the time Mrs. Williams saw him stressed about a loan. Dad, I need you to ask yourself something. Where is Mark getting his information? Has he shown you actual proof of anything he's claimed? Silence stretched between us. Finally, Dad said, we just want what's best for both our children. But for the first time, he sounded uncertain. Friday morning brought my promotion review meeting. I walked into the conference room with my head high, wearing my best navy suit and carrying a leather portfolio that held 5 years of documented excellence. The review committee consisted of Vincent, 2 senior vice presidents, and the chief operating officer. For 90 minutes, I presented my campaign results, my team leadership initiatives, and my strategic vision for the company's marketing future. I was calm, focused, and completely in control. Everything Mark had tried to destroy was on full display: my competence, my professionalism, my stability. When I finished, the COO leaned forward with a slight smile. Before we conclude, I want to commend you on how you handled that inappropriate situation last week. The caller who tried to impersonate a family member asking about disciplinary issues. My heart skipped. We take that kind of harassment seriously, he continued. It showed real character that you didn't let it affect your work. That's the kind of integrity we value. Vincent caught my eye and nodded slightly. They knew. My workplace knew someone had tried to sabotage me, and instead of doubting me, they'd been impressed by my professionalism. Thank you, I managed. I believe in letting my work speak for itself. I drove to my parents' house that evening, the promotion committee's praise still warm in my chest. I needed to tell them the good news, to show them that Mark's lies were crumbling. Mom answered the door, looking tired. Dad sat in the living room with Mark beside him. Perfect. I could address both of them at once. I have good news, I started. The promotion review went. Actually, Mark interrupted smoothly. Mom and Dad asked me to come by because there's been another incident at your office. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Don't play games, Elaine. I spoke to someone at Peterson Digital yesterday. They mentioned you had an outburst in a meeting. Threw papers, raised your voice at a superior. Every word was a calculated lie, delivered with perfect sincerity. That never happened, I said flatly. But I could see doubt flickering in my parents' eyes. Mark had called my workplace again, probably spinning more lies to whoever answered the phone. She's getting defensive again, Mark said softly to our parents. This is exactly what I warned you about. Dad nodded slowly. Mom's expression was pure worry. They believed him. Despite everything, despite my years of proven stability and success, they believed their golden boy over their daughter. Where did you hear this, Mark? I asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Mark's confident expression flickered for just a moment. I told you. I called. Who did you speak with? I pressed. What was their name? What department? I don't remember exactly. You don't remember who you spoke to about your sister's alleged mental breakdown? Mom frowned slightly. Mark, dear, who did you talk to? It was someone in HR, I think. Or maybe reception. They transferred me around. His story was getting vaguer by the second. Dad leaned forward. But they confirmed she had an outburst. They implied it. The tone was very concerning. Implied. Not confirmed. Not stated. Implied. For the first time, I saw doubt cross Dad's face. That seems odd, Dad said slowly. A company wouldn't discuss an employee's behavior with a random caller. I identified myself as family, Mark said quickly. They made an exception. But the damage was done. That tiny seed of doubt had been planted. I caught Mom and Dad exchanging a glance. They were finally starting to question their golden boy. I stood up. I'm going to go.
But I want you both to think about something.
Mark has made a lot of claims. Has he provided any actual proof? Over the next week, I changed my strategy completely. Instead of defending myself or trying to prove Mark wrong, I simply stopped engaging. When my parents called with concerns, I was vague and noncommittal. When they asked about work, I said things were fine and changed the subject. I stopped trying to convince them of anything. The beauty of Mark's lies was that they required constant maintenance. Each fabrication needed supporting details, and those details needed to stay consistent. By refusing to play defense, I forced him to keep talking, to keep elaborating, to keep spinning his web of deceit. And eventually, all liars make mistakes. On Wednesday, Dad called with another concern Mark had raised. I listened patiently, then asked, "Did Mark tell you this happened last week or 2 weeks ago?" He said last Friday. Interesting. He told Mom it was Thursday when she called yesterday. Silence. Maybe I'm misremembering, Dad said, but his voice carried new uncertainty. The next day, Dad apparently called Mark to clarify something. I know because Mark left me a furious voicemail. Stop trying to turn them against me. But I hadn't done anything. I'd simply let Mark's lies start contradicting themselves. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Law offices of Preston and Associates. My parents' longtime estate attorneys. I opened it with shaking hands. Dear Ms. Martinez, it read. This letter is to inform you that your parents are considering modifications to their estate plan. As a current beneficiary, you have the right to be notified of any proposed changes. We will be in touch regarding the formal review process. My heart sank, then I noticed the second page. A note, handwritten on the attorney's personal letterhead. Ms. Martinez, I felt you should know that your brother has contacted our office multiple times over the past month, inquiring about the process of establishing sole trustee status. He's been quite persistent, claiming your parents have already agreed to the changes. However, we have no documentation of such agreement. Please feel free to call me directly if you wish to discuss this matter. Howard Preston. I read the note 3 times. Preston was risking his professional relationship with my parents to warn me. That meant he was seriously concerned about what Mark was trying to do. I called him immediately. Mr. Preston, this is Elaine Martinez. Thank you for your note. Ms. Martinez, his voice was grave. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything quite like your brother's behavior. He's been pressuring us to expedite changes that your parents haven't even formally requested. Friday morning, I made an appointment with Arthur Brennan, my parents' longtime accountant. I'd known him since childhood. He'd done my first tax return when I got my first real job. Elaine, he greeted me warmly, then his expression turned serious. I was hoping you'd come see me. Why? He pulled out a file. Your brother visited me 3 weeks ago. He wanted copies of all the documentation related to your parents' rental properties. Titles, income statements, mortgage information, everything. My stomach tightened. Did you give them to him? I told him I needed your parents' written permission. He said they'd already approved it verbally. Arthur leaned forward. But when I called your parents to confirm, they seemed confused. Your mother said Mark had mentioned wanting to understand the family investments better, but she'd never authorized releasing confidential documents. So, you didn't give him anything? Not a single page. And Elaine. His expression turned troubled. When I told him I needed written authorization, he became quite agitated. He said something about time being critical, that he needed the documents for a pending financial opportunity. A pending financial opportunity. Mark needed those property documents as collateral for his failing business venture. And I was the only thing standing in his way. Saturday morning, I went to my bank to deposit a check. I was standing at the counter when I heard a familiar voice from the loan officer's area.
Mark.
I'm telling you, the properties are worth well over $2 million. Combined equity of at least $800,000. That's more than enough collateral for a $200,000 business loan. My heart raced. I couldn't see him, but I could hear every word. The loan officer's response was patient but firm. Mr. Martinez, We've been over this. You don't have legal ownership or management rights to these properties. Without documentation proving you're authorized to use them as collateral, we cannot approve this loan. My parents have agreed, Mark insisted, his voice rising. I'm in the process of getting that documentation right now. Then come back when you have it. Until then, I'm sorry. I heard a chair scrape back violently. This is ridiculous. I've been banking here for 10 years. And we appreciate your business, but we can't issue a $200,000 loan based on assets you don't control. I ducked behind a display of brochures as Mark stormed past, his face flushed with anger.
He never saw me.
$200,000. That's what this was all about. That's what my reputation, my relationship with my parents, and my career were worth to him. Monday brought the news I'd been waiting for. Vincent called me into his office with Patricia and the chief operating officer. Elaine, we're pleased to offer you the position of Director of Marketing Strategy, effective immediately. This comes with a 35% salary increase, expanded team leadership, and a seat in senior management meetings. I must have looked stunned because Vincent smiled. You earned this. Your performance speaks for itself, and the way you've handled yourself through recent challenges only confirmed our decision. They were promoting me higher than I'd even hoped for. Director level. Senior management. Your integrity and professionalism set the standard we want for this company, the COO added. Thank you. I managed, my voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down. That evening, I was celebrating with takeout and a glass of wine when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Dad standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I stepped aside to let him in. He sat on my couch, not speaking for a long moment. Finally, he said, something's not adding up with your brother's stories. My heart began to pound. What do you mean? The timing, the details. Things he's said to your mother don't match what he's told me. Dad looked older sitting on my couch, shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. Your brother told me last week that your company had contacted him about workplace concerns. But when I asked him which department called, he couldn't tell me. I sat down across from him, barely breathing. He said it was HR, then changed it to legal, then said he couldn't remember. Elaine, a call like that, you'd remember who you spoke to. Dad, wait. Let me finish. He rubbed his face tiredly. Then your mother mentioned Mark told her your job issues started 6 months ago. But he told me it was recent, just a few weeks. When I pointed that out, he said I'd misunderstood. Dad looked at me directly. I need you to tell me the truth. No defensiveness, no anger. Just facts. What's really happening at your job? I took a breath. I just got promoted to Director of Marketing Strategy. My performance reviews are excellent. And someone did call my workplace 3 weeks ago, pretending to be family, asking if I was under investigation. His face went very still. What?
My boss told me about it. It was so unusual they noted it in their security log.
Someone tried to plant doubts about me. Who would? Dad stopped, understanding flooding his features. Mark. For the next 2 weeks, my parents watched Mark carefully. Mom later told me they started paying attention to small inconsistencies they'd previously overlooked. When Mark claimed to be meeting a client, but came home smelling like a bar. When he said he'd visited me, but I was at work all day. When his stories about my supposed problems shifted and changed depending on who he was talking to. They didn't confront him. They just observed. One Tuesday evening, Mom was in the kitchen when Mark's phone rang in the living room. She heard him answer. No, I told you, the collateral is coming through. Just give me 2 more weeks. He noticed her in the doorway and quickly ended the call. Work stuff, he said casually. What kind of work requires collateral? Mom asked. Mark's face went blank for a moment before he recovered. Just a figure of speech. Business talk. But Mom wasn't stupid. She'd heard what she'd heard. That night, she told Dad what she'd overheard. They started putting pieces together. Mark's financial stress. His sudden concern about the family properties. His campaign to make me look unstable and unfit to be included in estate planning. It all pointed to one conclusion. Mark needed money, and he was willing to sacrifice his sister to get it. Dad called me Friday evening. Mark wants to have a family meeting Sunday. He says it's important we all sit down and discuss your situation. My situation. I almost laughed. Are you going to tell him you know? Sunday arrived cold and gray. I dressed carefully, professional but not aggressive, confident but not defensive. I packed my small folder of documents in my car, but left it there. I'd only bring it in if necessary. Mark was already at the house when I arrived, sitting in Dad's chair like he owned it. Mom and Dad sat together on the couch, their expressions unreadable. "Thanks for coming, Elaine," Mark said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I know this is difficult for you." I sat in the armchair opposite him and said nothing. "Mom, Dad, I think it's time we face the truth about Elaine's situation. I've been trying to protect her, to give her time to come clean, but—" "Mark," Dad interrupted quietly. "Before you continue, I have a question." Mark paused, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Sure, Dad. Where exactly did you get your information about Elaine's job problems?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I told you. I called her workplace. I spoke to—" "Who did you speak to?" asked, my voice calm. "What was their name?" "I don't remember the exact." "What day did you call?" Dad pressed. Mark's confidence was cracking. "It was a few weeks ago. Maybe 3 weeks." "You told Mom it was 2 weeks," I said softly. "Last Thursday." His face flushed. "I'm not on trial here. This meeting is about Elaine's." "Actually," I said, standing up, "this meeting is about the truth." I walked to my car and retrieved my folder. When I returned, Mark's face had gone pale. I opened the folder calmly, laying out documents on the coffee table one by one. "This is my official promotion letter from Peterson Digital Solutions, Director of Marketing Strategy, effective 2 weeks ago." Mark's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "This is a statement from my boss confirming that someone called our office 3 weeks ago, pretending to be family, asking if I was under investigation. That call was logged as suspicious." I pulled out another page. "This is a note from Preston and Associates, Mom and Dad's attorney, stating that Mark has called their office multiple times asking about procedures for establishing sole trustee status over your properties. He claimed you'd already agreed, but you hadn't." Dad inhaled sharply. "This is a statement from your accountant, Arthur Brennan, confirming that Mark requested confidential property documents without your written authorization. He told Arthur it was for a pending financial opportunity." Mark stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're twisting everything. And this," I continued, pulling out my final document, "is a credit report I legally obtained showing Mark has applied for numerous business loans in the past 2 months. All denied. All requiring collateral he doesn't have." The room went completely silent. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for the documents. She read through them slowly, her face growing paler with each page. Dad sat frozen, staring at Mark like he was seeing his son clearly for the first time. "Mark," Mom whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell me this isn't true." "It's not. She's manipulating everything." "Tell me you didn't lie about your sister." Mom's voice rose. "Tell me you didn't try to ruin her career. Tell me you didn't try to steal from your own family." "Steal?" "Mom, I would never." $200,000, I said quietly. "That's what you needed, wasn't it? A business loan you couldn't get without collateral. So you decided to take control of Mom and Dad's rental properties and use them to secure the loan." Mark's face went from red to white. "How did you?" "I was at the bank. I heard you arguing with the loan officer." Dad stood up slowly, his expression a mixture of heartbreak and fury. "You tried to steal from us. You lied about your sister. You called her workplace to sabotage her career." "Dad, please, I can explain." "What is there to explain?" Mom's tears were flowing freely now. "Why, Mark? Why would you do this to your sister? What did Elaine ever do to you except work hard and be successful?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable, because that was the truth. I hadn't done anything to Mark except exist as someone who might stand in the way of what he wanted. Mark's composure shattered completely. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The business opportunity, the investors waiting, everything I've worked for. So you decided to destroy your sister? Dad's voice was cold. You fabricated lies, called her workplace, tried to have her removed from our will, all so you could steal our properties for your business scheme? It's not stealing. It's our family's money. I deserve. Mom stood up, her sadness transforming into anger. You deserve nothing. Elaine earned everything she has. She worked for years while you coasted on charm and manipulation. That's not fair. Mark's voice turned desperate. You always favored her. The smart one, the successful one. We loved you equally, Dad said, his voice breaking. But Elaine never asked us to lie for her. She never tried to steal from us. She never betrayed her family for money. Mark looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something like hatred in his eyes. This is your fault. If you'd just stayed out of it, if you'd just let me handle the properties. Handle them? I asked quietly. You mean mortgage them for your failing business without Mom and Dad's knowledge? My business isn't failing, but his voice cracked on the words. The loans were denied because they saw through your lies, I continued. No legitimate lender will work with you now. You've destroyed your own credibility. Dad walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. Your mother and I have discussed this. We're revoking any pending changes to our will. You will not be managing our properties. You will not be making any financial decisions regarding our estate. Mark's face went slack with shock. Dad, you can't. We're also removing you as power of attorney for healthcare decisions. Elaine will be our sole designee in case of incapacity. This is because of her lies.
Mark pointed at me wildly.
She's manipulated you. Mom's voice cut through his protests like steel. She provided documentation. You provided nothing but stories that fell apart the moment we examined them. Which one of you is the liar, Mark? The question silenced him. We want you to leave now, Dad said quietly. Come back when you're ready to apologize to your sister and take responsibility for what you've done. Mark stared at them, at me, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally bitter resentment.
Fine.
When my business succeeds without your help, when I make it on my own, don't expect me to share anything with you. He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back to me. You've ruined my life, Elaine. I hope you're proud of yourself. The door slammed behind him. In the silence that followed, Mom started crying softly. Dad put his arm around her, and they held each other, grieving the son they thought they knew. 5 weeks later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Elaine? It's Mark. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. What do you want? I need to ask you something. He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. My business partner pulled out. The whole venture fell through. I'm broke, Elaine. I've got creditors calling, rent due, everything's falling apart. I closed my eyes, feeling a complicated mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I'm sorry to hear that. I need a co-signer for a loan. Just $5,000 to get me through the next few months. You're the only one who, no. The word came out firm and clear. Mark, I can't.
Please.
I'm your brother. I made mistakes, but I'm desperate here. You taught me something important, I said quietly. You taught me the danger of giving someone power they haven't earned, of trusting someone who's proven they'll betray that trust. So that's it? You're just going to let me fail? I'm not letting you do anything. You made your choices. You tried to destroy my career and steal from our parents. These are the consequences of your actions. He was silent for a long moment. Then, his voice bitter. I hope you enjoy your victory, Elaine. He hung up. I sat holding my phone, feeling the weight of that conversation. It wasn't victory I felt. It was freedom. 3 months after that Sunday confrontation, I stood in my parents' living room watching the late afternoon sunlight stream through the windows. The same room where Mark had tried to destroy me. The same couch where he'd sat spinning his lies. But now everything was different. Mom hugged me tightly. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Director of Marketing Strategy. Your father and I always knew you were special. Dad put his hand on my shoulder, his eyes still carrying shadows of regret. We should have trusted you from the beginning. We should have questioned Mark's stories immediately. Can you forgive us? I already have, I said honestly, because holding on to anger would only poison my own happiness. We'd started family therapy, the three of us, working through the betrayal and rebuilding trust. It was slow, painful work, but we were making progress. Mark hadn't returned. Mom had tried calling him twice, but both calls went to voicemail. We'd heard through relatives that he'd moved to Dallas, starting over with whatever pieces he could salvage from his failed business. I drove home as the sun set, my car filled with leftovers Mom had packed despite my protests. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent about a major client presentation next week. My career was flourishing. My relationships were healthy. I was finally completely free from being the scapegoat, the target, the obstacle in someone else's desperate scheme. As I pulled into my parking spot, I noticed Mrs. Williams watering her plants on her balcony. She waved, smiling. I waved back, grateful for her casual observation that had started unraveling Mark's web of lies. Sometimes freedom comes from standing up for yourself. Sometimes it comes from letting the truth speak when you can't. And sometimes it comes from walking away from people who will never value you the way you deserve. I walked into my apartment, closed the door behind me, and smiled. For the first time in months, I felt completely, perfectly at peace.